People across that town pulling together tonight. Juliana?
Doug, Lisa, there are a lot of emotions right now. People are upset. They have questions. I covered stories in this community for several years. This is a tight-knit group of people. Almost everyone in Marshall County has some kind of connection to this school. Now, it is emotional, Renee, but this is a strong community. They lean on each other when times are tough. And this morning, the people who live here are just trying to process what happened. I talked to someone who graduated from Marshall County High School not too long ago last night, and he's making orange and blue ribbons to hand out to people to remind them to pray for their school. He says it was surreal yesterday morning to wake up and find out his old high school that there was a shooting.
You know, my little sister was there and couldn't get a hold of her, and it was just like, I can't even put into words how I felt in that point in time. My best friends.
And Renee, this shooting is having a ripple effect in surrounding communities. On my way down here, I made calls to several school districts, school leaders from the surrounding counties, and they have the same message, that they support Marshall County. And I talked to the principal of Paducah Tillman, which is one of those rival high schools, and this morning the students there are holding a prayer circle before classes start. Now, I want to bring in our Holden Kerwicki, and you've been working with investigators, and this is taking an emotional toll on them as well.
Well, that's exactly right, Juliana. Most of the first responders live here, they work here. Their kids go to school here at Marshall County, and today, like many of us, they're trying to put together the pieces of how exactly this could happen in their hometown. There are about 1,300 kids at Marshall County High School, and all of them were impacted in some way by this shooting. Many parents say as they rushed to North Marshall Middle School to try and pick up their kids, they were panicked as they found out there was nearly a 3-hour wait. But that pales in comparison to the scene first responders faced at the high school, where 15-year-old Bailey Nicole Holt was found shot to death.
One of our first troopers to arrive on the scene saw the young lady that died there on the scene and thought it was his daughter, because she had been dropped off at the school this morning as well. Same clothing description, same description. And he had to go over to convince himself that that was not his daughter.
15-year-old Preston Ryan Cope was also flown to Vanderbilt University, where he later passed away from his injuries. 20 total students were injured as a result of what happened here yesterday morning.
Very hard, Holden. Well, now we want to bring in our Anna Rivera, and you saw the support we're seeing throughout the community last night.
That's right, Juliana. There were dozens of prayer services around the area at multiple different churches. I sat in the sanctuaries for one of them, and we saw so many people hugging, just thanking God that they were able to come together as a community. The sun set on Marshall County after a terrible tragedy. As darkness settled on the small town, local churches turned on their lights and opened their doors for so many grieving families. Using prayer and song, dozens of churches across the region started to heal in the aftermath of what became a horrible day that many will never forget. But for the people who call Benton home, they are connected by the pain that has touched so many families in this community.
So, you know, and when 16 youngsters are shot, everyone in this community, everyone in this region is going to know someone. So it's just absolutely broken all of our hearts.
And Juliana, of course, the message today was use this entire week to lean on each other in this time of need for so many people in this community.
Marshall County Public Schools are closed today. KSB troopers and school buses are blocking every entrance to the school. Investigators are expected back here today. This as people continue to process what happened. In about 30 minutes, I'm headed to Paducah Tillman High School, where students are gathering to pray for Marshall County High School. Well, let me tell you, that shooting that killed Bailey Holt and Preston Cope and hurt 18 others prompted the students at Paducah Tillman to do something about it. A call that the students at Marshall County responded to, saying they don't want this to define them, that Marshall County is more than just a school shooting.
It was USA Day because it was supposed to be homecoming week, and they heard the first shot.
A rivalry put aside.
You expect it in bigger cities and places hours and hours away, but you never really expect it to happen in Western Kentucky.
A day after 2 students were killed and 18 others were hurt at Marshall County High School, The team they're supposed to play at the end of basketball homecoming week invites them to their school to stand together in prayer and show their support.
We have rivalries when it comes to sports, but like when it comes to stuff like this, anytime there's a loss in the community, we all come together, and that's like what our Region 1 is about.
Paducah Tillman senior Coy Mary is still trying to grasp what happened. He remembers when he first found out students were in trouble at Marshall County High School.
We're all streaming it on our phones and calling people we know at Marshall County.
Investigators say a 15-year-old student came into the common area and shot at students. Marshall County senior Elizabeth Castleberry wasn't at school that day. She doesn't know if things will ever be normal where the shooting happened.
The Commons is like where everything happens. You line up for graduation there, your homecomings, your proms, everything's there, and that's where all the good stuff happens.
She says it's where people would have lined up after the big game Friday.
So when something like this happens, you wonder how it's ever supposed to be good there again.
Students on both teams want to take the floor Friday night.
I would like for it to happen just so we can show support to the people of Marshall County.
Well, that Marshall County student who tells me her friends were inside the school when the shooting happened weren't at the prayer circle today because they're not ready to face crowds. They tell her even a small noise can make them have flashbacks to what happened yesterday morning. And when I asked her about going back to school in this building, she says it's a real possibility and realizes things will never be the same.
Back to school today in Marshall County, but it's more than just the start of a new school year. In January, the spree of school shootings we saw happening across the country hit home in Kentucky at Marshall County High School. 2 students lost their lives. Juliana Valencia was there after that shooting happened, and she is back there again this morning as students head back to class. Juliana, I know that you used to work in West Kentucky. You're familiar with that community. How's that community doing this morning?
Chris, I was here hours after that shooting killed Bailey Holt and Preston Cope. Their memory honored here with this cross and around town with the words Marshall Strong. That phrase is the reason I'm back here again, to show Kentuckiana how strong this community has always been and how students are moving forward.
We want our school district to be as safe as possible. I wish I could stand in front of you today and say that nothing like that will ever happen again.
In 11 years as superintendent for Marshall County Schools, Trent Lovett says this has been his busiest summer.
I feel a lot safer with all the stuff they're doing, though.
Juniors Gage Smock and Devin Evans will see these metal detectors when they walk into school this year at Marshall County High. These metal detectors actually show where the metal is on a student's body. Lovett says students approached him about safety changes right away after a school shooting by a classmate in January killed 2 students, Bailey Holt and Preston Cope.
We finished out the year last year using wands, metal detector wands.
By the end of the school year, Lovett says he and his teachers were physically and mentally drained.
You're asking teachers to teach all day after they've been through book bag searches and metal detector wanding.
There will be no more book bags in these halls, and students can expect to see more school resource officers.
Priority as a faculty is to love our kids, and they do that every day.
Marshall County's principal, Patricia Greer, says she thinks in times of trauma, you don't see change, but who people truly are.
This is truly Marshall County. They are truly a supporter of their schools. They're truly a supporter of the community.
Gage and Devin, who have wounds of their own, are excited for a new year, but won't forget the classmates they lost.
The hardest thing about it's going to be knowing that those 2 should be here starting school with us is the thing that bothers me the most, but other than that, I think I'll be okay.
You've covered them in good times and in bad before. How is the community doing this morning?
Chris, no one in the community wants to focus on January 23rd. They want to focus on the now. What people here do want me to share with you is that people have helped one another in the community before the shooting and continue to do so. It's compassion I noticed when covering stories here, and it's what I see in the faces of 2 survivors who are standing strong and looking ahead.
Nobody will ever be okay with what happened, but you can grow stronger.
Thursday is junior Gage Smock's first day back at Marshall County High School since a school shooting by one of his classmates.
We were standing right next to each other when it happened. They went in right there, come out over here.
Another bullet went through Devin Evans' back and out his arm. They survived, but Bailey Holt, who was next to them, didn't.
Bailey, me and her have dated for 8 months before it happened. Just to be so close with somebody and then they're gone, that's been the hardest part for me. not having her still here.
Their tattoos are memorials of Bailey Holt and Preston Cope, who also died.
Imagine them instead of seeing that bullet hole there. Steps were leading up to heaven, and then I had the time of the shooting there just to go with it, and to have Bailey and Preston there just to get everything all in one.
Their best advice: be kind and be there for one another. They plan to show their gratitude to the Marshall Strong community through their work on the football field.
It's packed. It'll be awesome. It's amazing.
I imagine this year it'll be even better.
We're going to have to make another stadium for all of them.
Students are starting school in a couple of hours. They can expect to see parents and volunteers lining the road with signs, cheering them on as they pull in. As for the first football game, they're excited for the big rivalry against Fort Campbell next Friday. Chris, the principal of Marshall County High School, tells me she thinks that in times of trauma, it's not that people change, but they show who they truly are. And having worked in Western Kentucky for several years, I can agree with her that people in Marshall County truly are supporters of their schools.
Marshall Strong!
Something as small as a smile.
We are Marshall!
And a cheer can go a long way on the first day of school. The Marshall Strong community is no stranger to showing support.
I'm the 911 director for Marshall County, and I can't say enough good about the students.
LaDonna Correll is excited for this new start.
These guys are my heroes, and I just want to let them know how much we love them.
School shooting by a classmate less than 7 months ago killed 2 students, Bailey Holt and Preston Cope. Football players Gage Smock and Devin Evans were next to Bailey when they were hit.
If it would have been a half of a centimeter back, then I probably wouldn't be here.
If the bullet would have went straight on mine, it would have went through my heart.
Don't feel like that it can't happen in your location, because we're proof that this can happen anywhere.
Superintendent Trent Lovett says the security measures in place should make students feel safer this year.
Our students and our staff were very resilient. They bounced back very quickly. Not saying they were healed by any means, but they were so strong for one another.
Gage and Devin say the community support made a difference, but it's something this area has always done. Take the tradition of bringing ice-cold watermelon during hot summer football practices.
We'll look up on top of the hill and we see them up there and we're like, oh, we know it's coming.
Or when the University of Kentucky showed their support.
Big Blue Caravan, he brought Coach Cow, Coach Stoops, some of the football players.
One of the most moving moments came from a concert inside the school gym.
The Night of Healing was the name of it, and that's basically what it was.
And coming back and having that support from everybody around here in the community has made a huge impact.
The two showing off a little of their own support, keeping the memory of Bailey and Preston alive in the always Marshall Strong community. Those football players, Devin and Gage, had a piece of advice they wanted me to share with the students of Kentucky. It said, make relationships with everybody, because you never realize what one kind thing you say to somebody can change the rest of their day, what they're thinking, or the rest of their life. Live in Marshall County, Juliana, Valencia, WHAS 11 News.